There's a quiet irony in how wealth is often transferred. A parent spends decades building something meaningful. They make sacrifices, they take risks, they delay gratification, and then at the very end of their life, that wealth passes to their children. And those children may be in their 60s or their 70s. And at that stage, the money is less likely to be transformative. Sure, it's additive, but it's not foundational. And with people living longer than ever before, this scenario is pretty reasonable to expect. Transfer happens exactly as planned, but the impact is potentially a lot smaller than anyone expected. In contrast, there's a very different dynamic when wealth is transferred earlier. So when families can begin gifting to their children in their 20s or 30s or even their 40s in a measured and intentional way, then it can make a meaningful difference. And the reason is because at that stage, that's when money has lifestyle leverage. So that's when someone's choosing a career path, maybe starting a business, raising young children if they're lucky enough, taking some risks that they might not feel comfortable taking later, and even just deciding where and how to live. So at that stage, a dollar is not a dollar, it's optionality. And many wealthy families, they have more than enough wealth to support themselves for the rest of their life. So the question really isn't if their children will inherit, it's when and how. And if this is you, then your initial instinct might just be to wait. It's very reasonable. And you're probably saying something like, let them earn it. We don't want to ruin their motivation. We'll leave it to them later. But I think that the framing should be shifted a bit. So I also asked this question: when would this capital actually make the biggest difference? And my guess is the answer isn't later. It's probably now, or at least soon. So here's my case for giving earlier. Number one, you get to see the impact. I think this is a huge overlooked benefit. When wealth transfers at death, you never get to see what it becomes. You don't see a business that gets built. You don't see the stress that gets reduced. You don't see any of the opportunities that get pursued. So when you give earlier, you're not just transferring money, you're witnessing what your life's work enables. Number two is you reduce the size of a potential tax problem. So for many high net worth families, the estate itself can become a planning issue. So gifting earlier and putting some structures in place, that can gradually reduce the size of your taxable estate over time. And this isn't really about tax avoidance in a vacuum. It's about having some intentional distribution now instead of a forced distribution later. And I like this because it can create flexibility in how wealth is transferred across generations. Number three is that you fund the risk window of life. So there's this window, I say it's between 18 and 45, where people are most capable of taking meaningful risks. Doesn't mean that they want to, but they have the capability. So that's something like starting a company, making a big career change, maybe investing in something a little unconventional. But it's also when financial pressure can be the highest. Having mortgages, children to take care of, just some general life uncertainty. And you may even be able to think of a time in your own life when you were younger and you had even a modest amount of financial support, whether it was gifted or earned, and then having it during this window, this 18 to 45 window, dramatically changed your trajectory. That doesn't guarantee success, obviously, but it gives you a chance to step back, have some breathing room for potentially transformational decisions. And then number four is that you shift from inheritance to partnership. So when wealth is transferred at death, it can feel like a one-time event. But when gifting happens earlier, it can evolve into something else. It can be a shared project across generations. Legacy in motion. Parents can guide, children can execute. Mistakes can be made and learned from, but they'll happen while the stakes are still manageable. And I think that is probably one of the most valuable aspects of early gifting. Now, those are the benefits, but there are some real risks. Some things to worry about are loss of motivation. It's a valid concern. I think everyone knows a dilettante or two. I think it's less about the presence of the money, though, and more about the structure around it. So unstructured wealth can create problems, but I think purposeful wealth can steer people towards creating opportunities. Obviously, there's a worry about poor decision-making. I think somewhere I read that the prefrontal cortex, some part of the brain, isn't fully developed until someone's 25. So being younger, you have this biological situation where you may not be able to handle the money, and naturally being younger, you might not have the experience to manage it well. But I think it's also an argument for gradual exposure, but not total delay from the wealth. I mean, like if you waited until someone was 65 and then handed them the wealth for the very first time, it's not going to necessarily improve their decision making. It's just delaying the learning curve. And then there's also your own security. You have to be sure that you're not compromising your own financial independence. Longevity risk is real, and healthcare costs are very uncertain. So early gifting really only works when it's done from this position of true surplus. So those are all decent reasons for waiting. They're not irrational. You want to ensure that you have full financial security for yourself. It can also preserve simplicity in the planning, helps you avoid difficult conversations about fairness or control. And it can give your heirs an opportunity to just develop independently. And then, of course, there's other unintended consequences that can happen after early gifting, like loss of control over assets, the feeling of unequal treatment between beneficiaries. Of course, there's potential for adverse tax consequences depending on how you structure it and how you time it. So yeah, I get it. Waiting probably feels a lot safer. If you're not sure, this really isn't an either or decisions. You can adopt a blended approach. You don't give everything early, but I'd say don't wait your entire lifetime either. You can provide measured gifts earlier in life, and you can maintain some guardrails and structure that. Gifting in 1 year and having it not go well doesn't mean you've committed to gifting for forever. You can keep a large portion for later stage transfer. But I really like this as a way to build a process where you can educate and observe how your kids are going to do. So if your goal is just to simply transfer the wealth, then waiting can work just fine. But if the goal is to help shape lives and create opportunities and build something across generations, then I think the timing matters a lot more than people realize. If I had to sum it all up into just one frame, I'd say, don't just ask how much you're going to leave your kids, but ask when that wealth is going to matter most to them. Because I think that the most valuable transfer isn't necessarily the largest one. It's the one that arrives at the right time.